Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on this 1st of September 2021. Thank you for tuning in. Glad to have you here. Hey, I'm going to talk about today is what is a hyperinflation going to look like, a worldwide hyperinflation, in my opinion? And what's Bitcoin's place in this ecosystem if we have a worldwide hyperinflation? This is something we've never had before. But it's caused by one single action. Back in 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, all of the world's currencies were all pegged to the US dollar as to derive their value. Every currency on earth pegged to the US dollar. And when the US dollar was in turn pegged to gold, and this gave the whole world's currencies all a stability or a footing behind them. Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard. He by effect, took all of the world's currencies. He set them all free because they were all pegged to the dollar of gold, and they all became what's called fiat currencies. In other words, they're only money by decree. That's it. That system could continue to go on for a long time without the currencies losing much value or losing any value at all. If the respective central banks were to be careful how much money they print, how much new money they print, they could have balanced it for a long time. But what happens is politicians get into office, and they tend to spend money on programs and things that don't make any sense, a lot of it, but it makes the people happy, and they get reelected into office again. So this loose spending and increasing the debt of burden on countries, and printing excess amounts of currencies happened all over the earth. Really happened big time over in Europe, when they first went on the euro, Germany was basically extending their credit line to all of the countries, and you've all heard of what they call the countries they call the pigs countries, Italy, not Germany, but Italy, Portugal, Spain, these countries. And so they spent up a massive amount, and then they had a big crisis, back in 2008. And now we're in the aftermath of that, but that's just the beginning of it, and I mean they're inflating the value away in these fiat currencies, and confidence is starting to be eroded now. We're seeing the effect of that now. Confidence is starting to be eroded in all the fiat currencies. Now on the US dollar index, because the dollar's the biggest one, the dollar index is not going down substantially. And the reason why is because the dollar is perhaps the most stable of all these fiat currencies. And that's what's being compared against. The dollar is being compared against a basket of other fiat currencies like itself, which aren't doing as good as the dollar even. They're all going down together. This is what's called a race to the bottom. Jim Rickards wrote a book called The Death of Money. He's been mentioned money in there. He was talking about currencies. And in fact, we're headed toward this now. And we're heading toward it faster. It's going to be undeniable soon. And that's only going to increase the pace of it, because that makes the people lose confidence in the fiat currencies even faster. Where are they going to put their confidence when the fiat currencies lose money? And what about this being a worldwide hyperinflation? What's that going to look like? Well, I'll tell you. Countries around the earth, when they have a hyperinflation, experience a hyperinflation, always reach out to something that is maintaining its value as a means of exchange. They dump their own currencies. Like, if we see a country like, say, Zimbabwe, and they get their Zimbabwe dollars, they dump those. They don't want them. They don't even want to take them for payment. And they might move to something like the US dollar or something that's retaining its value and use that for making transactions with. But when we see a worldwide hyperinflation, with all the fiat countries losing value and people want to dump them, they don't even want to take them because it takes a wheelbarrow full to buy a loaf of bread, essentially, then they will still reach out to something that's maintaining its value. Cryptocurrencies, perhaps, or perhaps gold and silver. We don't know for sure yet because this hasn't happened yet. In fact, it's never ever happened in the history of the world. But in my mind, I think, personally, that they're going to go for both. I think it's going to be cryptocurrencies and gold and silver. And I think all of that is going to become the substitute for the fiat currencies, which are burning. Because you can't have a world where they cannot do trade, where there is no money. Can't have a world like that. Nothing functions. Black markets and markets that exist outside the range of the fiat currencies will pop up overnight. People have to do trade. They have to do commerce. And they'll very, very quickly, when it's there's an old saying, guys. It's called necessity is the mother of invention. You know, when you have to have something done, you might not do it according to Hoyle. You know, the old thing when you're playing cards, they say the rules according to Hoyle. You know, you might not do it according to Hoyle if you're forced into a situation where you have to improvise. And so the great improvisation for a worldwide hyperinflation, the greatest improvisation in the history of mankind, might be a sudden switch over from the fiat currencies into alternatives that are already setting themselves up in place right in front of your eyes. But what would that do to the value of these alternatives? Excuse me. Well, it means that all of the value now that's stored in fiat currencies. You get your house, you get your car, it's all, you price it everything in dollars. Well, if the dollar becomes worthless overnight, and all the other currencies too, I mean, here in Canada, it's a Canadian dollar. House is priced in Canadian dollars. Well, if you go to Japan, it's the yen. Their house is priced in yen. All of that can be converted overnight over and priced in something else. You know, Bitcoin, outside the US dollar itself, if you were to count Bitcoin as a currency, an actual currency, it's the only other worldwide currency, in other words, money, outside the US dollar. I've heard so many of them talking, you know, out there, saying how that the dollar will need to be replaced as a world reserve currency. And they say, no, it won't happen because there's nothing else out there. You know, they look at the Chinese yuan and they say, no, I can't see it going there, you know, because that's one of the bigger currencies out there. Will they replace it with the Swiss franc or whatever? There's nothing out there to replace the dollar. There's nothing out there that's a global, worldwide money. But for some reason, they just cannot get their heads around it that Bitcoin is a worldwide phenomenon. It's a worldwide money. Although it's not used everywhere, people, I mean, you just can't walk into a shopping mall and haul out a Bitcoin and say, well, I want to purchase this with my Bitcoin. You have to go through some sort of an exchange service, you know, like maybe you got a Bitcoin Visa card. Well, then you can use your Bitcoin. You know, that makes a go-between or a third party. You have to go through a third party to actually use your Bitcoin. But if the world is forced into this improvisation, the world might be forced into switching over forced into switching over because the dollars are absolutely worthless, and if they want to sell something, I mean, you know, they may be actually forced into switching over to something of value, because this is actually what happens when you get a hyperinflation. And it becomes severe if it's very quickly, it moves in very quickly, you know. So in a situation like that, all the value that's stored in all the countries on Earth, can you just imagine if it gets transferred over into gold and or Bitcoin, what the value of those asset classes would go up to? It might be something that is a little bit unimaginable for us right now, and that's why we can't get our heads around it. But, you know, Bitcoin is on track for all or nothing. Bitcoin is on track to do that. Or nothing on the other side of that. Something happens, maybe the governments will come in and ban it or something and drive the price down. It's all or nothing. And so Bitcoin, you know, is like a bet. It's like you're making a bet on whether or not that's going to happen. And a lot of you guys don't think about it that way. But I think about it that way every day. Bitcoin is like a bet. What's the odds that Bitcoin becomes a world reserve currency? Could it actually do that? And when you're buying Bitcoin, you're saying, I think that Bitcoin is going to be successful to the end, and Bitcoin is going to be worth a lot of money. It's almost like buying a lottery ticket. But, you know, I'm going to tell you guys what, the difference between buying Bitcoin and buying lottery tickets. The chances of you winning the lottery is about like you getting struck by lightning. It's very, very slim. And you know what? Don't laugh, because a lot of people in the United States and here in Canada probably this summer have been hit by lightning. It does happen. Especially if you're not careful and you don't stay inside when there's a lightning storm. So, you know, I'm deathly scared of this, by the way, just as a side note for you guys. I'm deathly scared of lightning. If there's lightning outside, I will not go outside the house. Because it's fluky. You can run into the car to grab a banana or something halfway to the car, the lightning, you just don't even hear it come. It's so quick. Bang, it's got you. You know, so I stay inside the house. Anyway, getting sidetracked off the subject. Subject is, could Bitcoin do that? Can Bitcoin become the be-all, end-all? What's the odds? And, you know, the odds of winning the lottery are being struck by lightning. But, you know, I think the odds are substantially higher that Bitcoin is actually going to finally do this to the end. I can only see a couple things that could stand in the way, and they're kind of obscure. And the reason why they're obscure is for the governments to actually bring down Bitcoin, the central banks to turn on Bitcoin, it would take a united effort. Now, I used to say, when are they ever united on anything? Well, they were united on this COVID crisis. And so, yeah, they can unite. The governments can unite and do the same. All of them do the same thing. They can do that. And if they all turned on Bitcoin, yes, they could possibly crush it. But what's the odds of that actually happening? So instead of let's looking at the odds of Bitcoin becoming the world reserve currency, let's look, what's the odds of all the countries on Earth working unanimously to take down Bitcoin? What's the odds of that actually happening? I think it's not that great odds. So if you were betting on that, if you're a betting man, say you're betting on whether the countries will all work unanimously to take down Bitcoin, I don't think the odds are as good for that as they are for Bitcoin to be the number one. The odds, I think, are a little bit better than them all taking Bitcoin down. And Bitcoin ain't going to stop until it's number one. It's going to keep plugging along and growing and growing and growing as time progresses. You've seen the growth. 2009 is when it first came along. And look how big it is now compared to 2009 when that guy bought 2 pizzas for 7,000 Bitcoins. How much bigger it is now. So you're making this bet. when you buy Bitcoin, you're making this bet, will Bitcoin succeed? I think there's fairly good odds it will. An awful lot better odds than when you buy a lottery ticket. But what's the payout going to be like? I think the payout's going to be as big as your lottery ticket. So basically, you guys that are buying Bitcoin, you're buying your lottery ticket. Now, what about gold and silver? They could have an enormous payout too. And I think their odds of being worth nothing are almost zip. I mean, they're just going to go up in value. So they're more of a sure thing for the guy out there who's worried about Bitcoin being taken down. Gold and silver's never going to be free. And they're never going to go to zero, you know. Bitcoin, if the governments out there all worked unanimously, they could take Bitcoin down and the price could go down to practically zero. Because they'd all make it illegal. And we've seen them work together on COVID, so there is a chance of them actually doing that. It's a remote. I think it's a remote chance. I don't think it's a very big chance. I'm only going to put it at about maybe a 25% chance of it happening. That would mean the other side of that coin is a 75% chance of Bitcoin succeeding, because I don't think Bitcoin's going to stop. I think if Bitcoin keeps going at some point in the future, I don't know whether it's 2 years from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it's going to be the big thing. So it's actually what you guys are doing when you're buying Bitcoin is a bet, and it's actually you've got pretty good odds. And if Bitcoin wins those odds, Bitcoin's going to be worth an enormous amount of money. Bitcoin's going to be worth, well, let's just put it this way, probably 10% of a Bitcoin be all you need if Bitcoin succeeds. And if you hang on to it until it reaches that bitter conclusion, that final conclusion where, and why I say bitter is because the world isn't going to be a very pleasant place. Because that transition is going to be a hyperinflationary transition. You're going to see an awful lot of problems in the world. But your Bitcoin will be worth a lot, an awful lot. And gold and silver will be worth an awful lot. So I think to cover all the bases, what you actually need gold, silver, and Bitcoin, and you need the real physical gold and silver to kind of cover your bases. In this world that's drifting, slowly drifting, and it's going to go faster and faster toward the end, toward a worldwide hyperinflation. Thank you guys for listening to my show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the very next episode. Bye-bye.